When you start collecting ancient coins, there are a few fears everyone has which are quite obvious. Falling for a fake is probably number one. Not knowing how to research prices and end up overpaying. Not knowing what the quote-unquote reputable part of the market everyone talks about actually is, and who are these reputable dealers. These are very real pitfalls, and you're doing yourself a huge favor by worrying about these. But over the years, I've noticed there is a second layer, a second wave of typical mistakes almost every single collector falls for, myself included, especially when they overcome that initial stage of the absolute beginner. If you've been collecting for around 6 months to 1 year, you are particularly vulnerable. These mistakes are the result of a cognitive bias known as the Dunning-Kruger effect, also known as the false mastery trap. In short, this is a tendency for people with limited experience in a subject to overestimate how much they actually understand, because they do not yet know enough to see the full complexity of the field. In ancient coin collecting, this often shows up at around this 6-month time. It's that kind of collector who has already started grasping the basic concepts. They probably have a small collection already, certainly understand far more than a complete beginner. However, that early progress can create this false sense of mastery, especially in a marathon like this hobby. These people are still highly vulnerable to the more complex types of fakes out there because he or she hasn't had the time to look at thousands of coins and develop that mental muscle of recognizing the signs of a good coin from a bad coin. And this person might not have in place a systematized way to do price research or to avoid being dragged into like a bidding war at auction. And since an absolute beginner, someone in like their first month of collector, these people actually approach the market in this very guarded attitude. These, may I say, not so absolutely, but still pretty much beginner types of collectors, they tend to be rather reckless on their purchases. And I want you to avoid falling for these mistakes. So let's go over this list to see if you might be one of these types of collectors. Okay, as far as the mistakes themselves go, for the first one, this one I personally fell for, is becoming overconfident after gaining enough experience in my first type of coin, my first niche. Now, what do I mean by this? Let me illustrate with a personal case. I started collecting Roman coins, like many of you, with the cheaper 3rd century silver Antoniniani and other more affordable Roman silver. And after handling enough of them, I began to feel like I really understood Roman coins in general. But, quote, Roman silver, it's not like a single field. That's like a super broad term for a ton of different coins. The knowledge that helps you like judge one 3rd century Antoninianus does not automatically carry over to something like a Republican denarius, even though both are struck silver Roman coins. The appearance of the metal of the coin, the appearance of the alloy, the physical aspects of it, the style, the way they are normally struck, the appearance of the rims, there's a surprising number of variations when you put these two coins side by side, despite these two coins being relatively close in pure numismatic terms. I learned this lesson the hard way when I decided, after I've been collecting Antoniniani, to buy a Republican denarius on eBay. I was feeling pretty confident with my collection of like 10 coins, and I was actually much more confident than I should have. And as a result, I ended up getting this really ridiculous cast fake. I don't even think that coin was made out of silver. You see, what really teaches you to detect fake coins is, in simple terms, a combination of understanding how a certain type of coin was originally made and seeing enough genuine examples in this safe environment, free of fakes, that you gradually build a mental image, almost like a template, of what a real coin of this particular type should look and feel like. As collectors gain that initial experience and the subsequent excitement of thinking you are grasping the arcane art of ancient coins that are 2 millennia old, It's easy to assume that progress in one niche makes you competent across the board. I mean, it really helps. The more you learn about ancient coins in general, the faster learning new niches becomes because there are overlapping authenticity cues between them. As an example, a Roman denarius or a Greek Hellenistic drachma both share some physical traits, as like their manufacture techniques was kind of similar, but other characteristics, style, lettering, etc., they could still be very different, and these differences matter. So you should absolutely celebrate your victories in this hobby, and you should celebrate getting experience, but you shouldn't become careless. So in practice, what does that mean? This means you may feel comfortable using like riskier venues like eBay for coins you know extremely well, but when you move into a new type, it is usually wiser to stay with, once again, a well-established dealer until you have handled a few examples and developed a new mental template for what is good for that type of coin. You need to take a few steps back. So, since the first tip was related to the purchase of coins you aren't familiar with, tip number 2 is also somewhat related to it. Another common mistake is buying something outside of your real field of interest simply because it seems like good value. Early in a collector's journey, once you begin understanding the market, you quickly realize that some types of ancient coins look surprisingly cheap for what they offer. Now, that word value is of course very subjective, but in context of collectibles, it's kind of easier to understand. There are whole categories of coins that survive in very decent grade of preservation. They're relatively plentiful, they look fantastic, given some may not feature the most famous historical figures, and so certain types of coins sell for much less than the more popular areas of the market. The 3rd century Roman emperors are a classic example. God bless our great Gordian III. Any Roman coin collector out there will get this reference. He's the king of good value for money as far as Roman silver goes. And there are other types as well that I can think of, like ancient Indian coins come to mind. These are very good value. Hellenistic bronzes. There's lots of good value niches. And to be clear, I do think these lesser known series can be fantastic to collect. Not necessarily because they're affordable, simply because they're cheap, but because they can open the door to fascinating corners of history that many collectors overlook. The problem begins when you buy them not because they genuinely interest you, but simply because they let you get like more coin for the money. I say this because ancient coin collecting is a marathon. It is a hobby that rewards years of slow, sustained study. And the fuel that keeps you engaged over the time span is pure, genuine interest, because you're going to be doing this for years. You need to actually like the coins you collect. You need some real curiosity that transcends the numismatic field and goes towards like the entirety of the people who made this coin, their culture, their symbols. Otherwise, your motivations to study them will weaken over time. If the coins do not really grab your attention, you are much less likely to put in the work required to understand the type properly, and you're also much more likely to lose enthusiasm and sell them later. And this is where the supposed value starts to collapse. Once you buy coins without much real attachment to them, the odds of simply selling them later become much higher. And when that moment comes, we need to remember that you often lose money through seller's fees, commissions, shipping, and simply because the market does not return what you paid. So collecting a type purely because it seems like good value often leads to the opposite result. Not only do you risk losing money in the long run, but you also weaken the very thing that makes someone grow as a collector, which is the desire to keep studying and getting better. And also you just waste time. Now, I fell for this mistake myself. over time I have accumulated a few Islamic bronze and silvers simply because they ended up near the end of auctions when many bidders had already left, and I managed to pick them up very cheaply. But the truth is that I am not especially interested in this niche, and I do not have the time right now, or in the near future probably, to learn Arabic, which makes collecting them somewhat pointless to me. So even though each coin was individually very inexpensive, I am now left with a small group of coins that together could have been one high quality coin in an area I actually collect seriously. And if I decide to sell them, I will probably lose money anyways. So for me, that was a useful lesson. Do not fall for the illusion of value when the coins themselves are not something you truly care about. And you know what? That is actually an interesting opportunity for me to leave today's question to you. Please let me know in the comments section for this video if you have already purchased a coin you might not have been particularly crazy about, simply because you thought it was cheap. Did you regret that purchase afterwards? I'm curious about what you have to say. Also, while you're at it, consider leaving a like in this video and subscribe to our newsletter where every week I give you updates on the ancient coin market. The link will be in the video description and in the pinned comment. Alright, let's keep moving. And for tip number 3, still in the market side of things, we get to, quote, get the best coin you can afford. This one also hits hard for me. It has to do with a certain scarcity mentality that many of us have. So, we don't want to throw our money away, but spending money is an inevitable part of this hobby. And there are certain realities of the market that we need to accept when it comes to the price of things. It sounds kind of obvious, doesn't it? I mean, things cost money, but you would be surprised with the lengths we go to and the bad decisions we take in order to save up some money, especially in the parts of our collection that we actually shouldn't be stingy with. So here's a personal anecdote. One of my favorite sets to collect are the so-called 5 good emperors of Rome. 4 of these 5 men ruled for fairly long reigns, and their coins are very abundant. They are not the cheapest coins to collect in the ancient Roman series, that's true, but their coins can be acquired for a reasonable sum. With the exception of this guy, Nerva, the first of the series. He reigned for less than 2 years. His coins are scarce, particularly when we look at him against his other 4 successors, and since he's part of a popular set amongst collectors, his coins are understandably much more expensive and more on demand. Now, that is a reality, and reality is really brutal when it comes to imposing itself on us. I will not, unless I am incredibly lucky, I will not be able to buy a coin of a similar quality to those of the other 4 emperors for the same price. Supply and demand, it's just how things are. Nerva coins are scarcer. This situation looks a lot like the phenomena of the key dates when you collect something like modern coins, like US coins. There are certain dates that are just less common because they were struck in smaller numbers and they are expensive. That's it. Now, regardless of what you collect, when you are faced with such a situation, you need to make a tough decision. Are you going to be flexible in the grade of the coin, meaning you will accept an uglier coin compared to the rest of the series in order to complete the set of yours without stretching your budget? Or are you going to bite the bullet, save for 2-3 months, maybe more if necessary, in order to have this key coin in a grade that is compatible with the rest of your collection? That is a decision you must make. It takes a surprisingly amount of internal reflection, and it's actually harder than you think to accept this reality. The reality that you're either going to have grade or you're going to stay on budget. You can't have both. This Nerva Denarius you see here on your screen, it's a fairly recent addition to my collection. It takes the spot of representing this emperor in the 5 Good Emperors set, and it is, I kid you not, the 4th iteration of a Nerva Denarius to take this place. For the last 5 years, I have been trying to buy such a coin. I have come across coins that were good looking but understandably pricier, but I always ended up getting something cheaper and uglier. And every time I bought some of the previous coins, I always ended up lying to myself that this coin is pretty enough for the spot, that this is a compromise that works. And for 4 freaking times, I ended up looking at the coin later and saying, yeah, that coin doesn't fit in my set, because this is an important set for me. I enjoy 2nd century Rome, so this set needs to be good looking. And you're going to have your own version of this. Yes, that's a coin worth a value that I'm not comfortable paying for an individual piece, but hey, that's just what it is. Deal with it. So, and you will personally go through your own version of this drama with whatever you like to collect. There's always a key date, there's always a key coin, a hard coin, and you will take an equally hard hit on your wallet. And what happened to the previous 4 iterations of this coin? They were sold to raise capital for another attempt at getting a better coin. And once more, with each sale, I lost money on to sellers' fees, to shipping, money that I could have directed to buying a decent example in the first place. Haven't I decided that I was smarter than the market and I could get something that isn't cheap for cheap? It's just not how it works. And if I can prevent you from making this expensive mistake 4 times, well, now you've been warned. There are certain expenses in your collecting journey that you just have to accept. So you might as well spend money once and do it right. Okay, number 4. Let's talk about auctions. And this one is what I would call, quote, falling in love for something you don't yet own. How common it is for one to obsess over a coin listed at auction and allowing that obsession to turn into overbidding. Now, you see, auctions can be surprisingly anxiety-inducing experiences because they are structured in a way that activates some very primal instincts in us. The urge to gather something scarce, the fear of missing out, the sense of competition, and the emotional attachment we develop toward things we already imagine as ours. And the moment emotions start driving our decisions, logic and planning just have a tendency of going out the window because that little anxious monkey inside of you is beginning to scream for you to ensure you get that coin, whatever the cost. And that little monkey doesn't understand about budgeting, about financial planning. It doesn't understand about none of that. This kind of destructive mental process begins like long before the live auction itself. Auctions are published weeks, sometimes even months in advance. The coins are photographed and presented beautifully. The opening bids are also generally very low, and the estimate prices they put is also quite low. And this makes them look like irresistible opportunities. During that whole period, you usually have no idea how many other people are watching the same coin. So the listing creates an illusion of easy value. The coin looks excellent, the price looks low, and it sits there long enough for you to keep returning to it, thinking about it, imagining how good that coin would look in your trace, and mentally fitting it into your collection. And at that stage, the danger is not just that the coin seems affordable, but that you begin to form a one-sided emotional attachment to it. You start behaving as if it is already yours. The problem is, you still have to win it. And then reality kicks in. In the hours before the auction, or sometimes the previous day, you begin to see bids trickling in. That is when the anxiety starts, because suddenly other people are not abstract anymore. Now there is evidence that someone else wants your coin, the coin you had already pictured in your collection. By the time the live auction starts, you have like weeks of emotional investment built up. Then you get to like the bidding itself, the moment of truth. It's all over in a few seconds. It's fast, it's competitive, it's a very brutal experience. And there's very little time to think, while you had lots of times to think about imagining that coin in your collection. And that means, unless you are a special kind of individual who's highly disciplined, it is incredibly easy to get dragged into a bidding war. And at that point, you are no longer paying for what the coin is worth in any objective sense. You are paying whatever it takes. It's your coin. Monkey wants coin. Monkey fights. Monkey gets the coin. Monkey goes bankrupt, but it gets the coin. Which is the reason why I think auctions are so dangerous for beginners. Because this is the kind of collector who hasn't yet been hardened by the sheer heartbreak of losing coins at auction and understanding you should not stay emotionally attached to a coin. The auction is an experience where you need to be completely detached from everything. The most important defense, if there is one, is it would be for you to decide previously with a lot of advance on a firm maximum bid before the sale, and you really treat that limit as like absolute. Easier said than done though. This is a kind of situation where for most people, I think this discipline only comes with experience, especially after you have lost a number of coins and realize that an auction coin is not yours when you first see the listing, or when you place a bid, or even when you're leading the auction. It is only yours when it reaches your home. Until then, it remains a temptation in a system specifically designed to make you feel urgency. So, you've been warned. And the very last tip is for the happy times after you've won your coin. Yes, you won it at auction or on the market, and you went ahead, you bought it, it was sent to your home, it's officially your coin. Now, hopefully you have some money left to invest into a place to store your coins, don't you? Not investing in proper storage is another very common mistake. When you first start collecting, storage can feel like a secondary concern, something you can sort out later once the collection becomes serious. But that is the wrong way to think about it. Your collection will grow faster than you expect, and if you do not plan ahead, you end up improvising with ugly subpar solutions like added boxes, cases. It can quickly become like an ugly, disorganized mess. So I think a good rule is to think about storage in 3-year cycles. Every time you invest in a storage solution, whether you want to use like cases with flips, capsules, or even cabinets, do it with roughly 3 years of expected collection growth in mind, and then reassess the whole setup again after that period. This kind of approach helps you avoid constantly replacing, reorganizing, and patching together inadequate storage as your collection expands. The storage itself should be appropriate for the coins you collect. That means choosing like the trays, the cases, the flips, or whichever other systems with a range of like slot sizes that actually fit your coins, and making sure the materials involved in like the physical things your storage is made out of, that they are chemically inert so they will not damage your coins over time. And storage is not just about what and where like the coin sits in. It's also about where the entire collection plus the storage will physically be in. You should think carefully about the place in your house where the coins will be kept. Whether it is large enough. You would be surprised on how much space some storage solutions like a cabinet requires. It must also be a sheltered and secure place. And if that's not realistic, if you think your collection maybe isn't in a place that it's safe enough for you, or depending on your personal circumstances, it may be worth considering like a safe or a bank deposit box of an appropriate size, again with future growth in this like 3-year cycle in mind. Of course, you don't need to keep your entire collection in a safe if it's not practical to do so. So another sensible option is to have like a two-tiered system with a more secure, separate storage area, specifically for those more expensive coins, and an easily accessible storage for anything that requires a more budget-oriented solution. Finally, wherever you decide to store your coins in, environmental control matters, especially humidity. I personally recommend keeping moisture low with something like a dehumidifier or at least some little silica gel packs in your trays alongside like your coins, like in close proximity to your coins. And also just make sure to switch them for new ones every 6 months. They're cheap and will greatly slow down any kinds of chemical reactions going on around your coins or in its surface that you may not know about. So as you can see, most of these tips are not that related to like hard numismatic knowledge. In fact, they are, if you think about it, they're mostly related to like behavioral patterns, like certain mindset patterns we have that lead up to errors in our collecting journey. You know, like overconfidence, the ego thing when you start accumulating knowledge, tunnel visioning on the coins and forgetting about the peripherals that help you collect coins, greed and emotional attachment to coins you don't yet own. Like while brainstorming to this for making this script, like it was a fascinating realization that I had. It's like the process of becoming a better coin collector needs to be done in two fronts. One that is purely technical, of like hard knowledge about coins, but at the same time, we need to become wiser, like as a person, in order not to let ourselves be carried away by our emotions, which can lead us to some pretty expensive and stupid mistakes. Maybe even more expensive than simple lack of numismatic knowledge. So, there you have it, 5 very powerful tips to help you out in your journey. What do you think? Let us know about more tips and potential mistakes collectors can fall for and how to avoid them. Let's transform this into a collaborative space, so I want to read what you have to say in the comment section below. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and consider subscribing if you did. Happy collecting, and I'll see you soon. Let me give a special thank you to all of my amazing channel members and Patreons for their generous support. This channel would not be the same without your help. And if you would like to be part of this list, have early access to my videos when they are uploaded to YouTube, and a series of other perks, make sure to check out my Patreon page and my members tab on YouTube. Thank you very much.